For the past few years, inevitably, you have come across online coverage of how dating amongst young people has gotten much worse, how the dating landscape has shifted to dating apps, and how both sides hate each other for how the other side is behaving. Numerous factors have been pointed to as to the culprits behind this current situation, from the consistent change in socioeconomic differences between men and women, the so-called toxic masculinity sphere, porn and gaming amongst men, the standards that women now have nowadays, the lack of third spaces, and so on and so forth. But honestly, one glaring issue that hasn't really been touched upon, or at least is being framed as honestly by a few people online, is about the long-term social setting or lack thereof that would allow young workers and even university students to more easily form social connections and by that extent, social circles and social experiences that would improve their lives. Its increasing disappearance is just contributing to this dysfunctional dating landscape as its void is getting filled up by these dating apps. And it's not just third spaces, that's something that people like to harp upon about as to what is causing this, decrease social situation amongst young people. But that's something that is just not true. And something that I'll be covering in this video and more comprehensively in its own video in the future. So for this video, I'll be reacting to a video made by TYT, the Young Turks, called Gen Z is Having a Sex Crisis, that goes over the increased sexlessness amongst young people and in general across all ages. TYT rightly point out how this is quite bad news, as the impact of not getting into a relationship, especially as a young person between their 20s and 30s, hits harder through their life experience and development as a person. They also allude to some culprits behind this current epidemic, so they give their own assessments of how impactful each one is, some of which I agree with, some of which I don't, and some of which I don't really have a strong opinion on. But yeah, let's get on to the video.
Going down. What are we talking about? No sex at all in the last year as Kate's off on the side laughing it up.
I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not laughing.
She's doing something.
Sure.
She's not even sure.
I'm blushing under all of this makeup.
She's blushing. There we go. In the 1990s, among all adults, no sex at all in the last year was 18%. In 2024, look at that. No sex at all. Up again 10 points. Look at here, those 18 to 21, look at that, 24% in the 1990s. It's the younger folks who are getting up sex. Look at that percentage, doubled. No.
So obviously there are multiple factors at play. Let's not just single out any one of them and say that's the 100% cause of all the situation. So I'll just be listing them out one by one. So the first one is the, dating landscape. So if there's just bad dating, if people don't get along while dating, then obviously there probably won't be much sex going on. And with dating apps being the main channel of which people date through, then obviously that means that this is going to be quite a dysfunctional landscape. The second one is social aspects. So people nowadays have less friends, they're more isolated. They have smaller social circles, so that also leads to a worse dating and, as I just mentioned before, worse sex situation because honestly, a good way to go into dating is familiarity or even friendships, and that aspect is being taken away since a few years ago, and I'll explain shortly why that is. I think the answer is kind of obvious, but some people don't like it. Yeah, so that's the second point. Third point is the ever-changing difference between men and women when it comes to socioeconomic status. I think everyone knows nowadays that women are catching up to men or even are earning more than men, depending on what study or graph you're looking at. But generally, the concept is there is that the gap between men and women is really closing, if not, it's non-existent. And that obviously plays a role into at least the long-term social um, possibility of two people dating. Then another high-level aspect that I'm going to touch upon in more detail is stress. It's a bit more subtle. I don't think I've heard anyone in the space talk about it, but yeah, it's kind of relevant. People aren't as sociable when they're stressed, and that comes through many different causes in life, especially in this modern era. So one of them would be really just the economic aspect of life. There's just a increasing cost of living. House prices are getting higher. It just feels like it's getting more suffocating from a more financial standpoint for people in between their 20s and 30s. And you have things such as house prices increasing, tuition fees and loans. You hear some stories about how some loans are ridiculous. So yeah, that's another thing um, to identify as a factor behind this current situation. And in this video, I'll be focusing on two particular factors that I believe deserve more attention. And yeah, those two are the social aspect that I mentioned, so less friendships, and the second one is stress. Right. So when it comes to the social aspect or social circle, I think it's clear nowadays, especially these past few years, that we are in a loneliness crisis. We're socializing less, we have smaller social circles, and so on and so forth. It's not crazy to think that a romantic relationship typically and easily starts with two people being in regular physical proximity with each other, or maybe they have family or friends that introduce them. So there's this kind of this vetting of how two people would get along either directly or indirectly. And yeah, in fact, typically that was how people met before these online dating apps, and that was through friends, coworkers, and family, and even in school and college. And yeah, I'm going to elaborate more of this in a future video of mine, but essentially the gradual shift to remote since COVID, whether it is from working, whether it's working from home or studying at home, aka distance learning, that has significantly reduced the social opportunity to form social circles in this globalized era. Um, so without these reliable social mechanisms on a societal level, it's no wonder that there are less friendships and by that extent, less dating. And yeah, these social settings, these social mechanisms have been in play for the vast majority of human history. So it's no wonder that without them, or at least a major lack of them, that people are feeling the brunt of it when it comes to the social aspect of their life. Right, now on to stress. I think it's a bit more subtle, less ta talked about factor when discussing about dating or just even socializing. It makes sense that when a person is stressed, especially with the busy lives that we have nowadays, with work, studying to improve your skills so you can get better work, exercise, groceries, cleaning, chores, and the list goes on, that you're not really in a great mood to socialize. You're kind of drained, you're kind of exhausted, you're kind of suffocating, it feels like sometimes. And that makes it so that you don't feel like socializing and going out. And yeah, even when you are around people, you have that kind of mood that is not so free, and you're a bit more tense around people. So yeah, it just affects socializing in general. And yeah, unfortunately, given the socioeconomic era that we're living in right now, most of the things that I mentioned can't be changed outright. You have to go to work. Obviously, you have to try and improve your situation by improving your skill, learning a new skill, or so on and so forth. And naturally, of course, we need to put some time towards that, and it feels like we have less and less time for ourselves. But yeah, on this little aspect right here, not little, um, if I had to provide a way to mitigate that stress, it would be through meditation. I'll make this video in the near future, but essentially, in a nutshell, you know, what is stress, at least for me personally, is the sensation of this kind of tightness in your head, or at least the sides of your head. And yeah, just putting aside a few moments every day. So instead of going to eat and watching YouTube, right? Just eat or something and not do anything else, not keep your mind engaged in anything else. No matter how trivial it is still being engaged. So yeah, you can just, I don't know, instead of just going on your phone when you're on a break from your work, you can just sit, look at an empty space in your room, a fixed point space, try to reduce noise and just like kind of zone out for like 10 to 15 minutes and don't feel pressure on to yourself to act right because that's essentially the onus the quintessential quality of this current lifestyle that we have, which is always feeling that we have to do something, which isn't, if you actually think about it and stop to actually feel about it, a good thing to pursue because for the vast majority of human life, I don't think that this was something that our bodies or and our minds were meant to do, right? To constantly think about what the next thing is, constantly receive information from social media, especially when it comes to politics or just any bad news, or even like just trivial news. Like even if you're like doom scrolling, like watching silly shit on YouTube, on shorts, that is still engaging your brain. And yeah, for the vast majority of humankind, we didn't really have to do that. Yeah, there were just other different negatives about life back then, but one that wasn't there was the need to constantly have your mind engaged and constantly working. Um, so yeah, if you were like plowing a field or collecting food or doing whatever for your village, it wasn't such a demanding, at least a cognitively demanding activity that your mind was put through throughout your day. So that's just my theory of just why it just feels more stressful these past few years, or in general, not just these past few years since COVID, but yeah, in this time of like computers and online work, it just feels like it's just uh, more draining. And of course, social media, being on your phone all the time. But yeah, just you know, every day or at least every other day, whatever pace you feel comfortable with, just for like 10 to 15 minutes as a starting period, because you can meditate for longer. Just don't do anything. Don't put an expectation onto yourself. Find a free period in your day and just don't do anything and just um, feel, honestly, after like 10 to 15 minutes, you'll start to feel a lighter sensation in your head. So it's actually quite nice if you get used to it. So just don't get worried if you're uncomfortable at the first, in the first few times that you do it, but it is going to get better. And even the first time you do it, it is going to feel nice.
Guys, the reason why we're like kind of flipping out over it is not because we're like some sort of weirdo sex enthusiast. No, we're losing human contact.
No, I'm worried.
Right?
I'm worried about people. Like, I want people to live happy, healthy lives. I want them to thrive. And honestly, that's impossible to do without human intimacy, connection. Like, it's not about the act of sex. It's what everything that's wrapped into that is, you know what I mean? How it enriches your life if it's a meaningful type of relationship, right?
So TYT point to a downstream impact of this current dysfunctional dating landscape, which honestly really isn't talked about by pretty much any typical video on the dating problem nowadays. Typically, channels would talk about how this dating problem would naturally contribute to, the population decline being observed across all over the world, and that we would have a more aging population across most developed nations, and the different problems it would present. But no one really talks about how, it sucks as a young person, and that's, if you don't have relationships, you don't have sex, um, if you don't socialize with people and enjoy yourselves, you're just gonna have a less fulfilling life, right? Like you need to be making out these social connections. You need to be just talking to people, dating, having sex. Like these are things that are needed for a healthy young person. I know there are, of course, general exceptions, but in this era where people like to cope and just rationalize it as something that's good for them, for most people, this is not a good thing, right? And I understand why some people like to cope, but if we're really being honest here, it is just a cope to just justify the current situation that one may be having that is not meeting their expectations. So yeah, it sucks that this is the current general dating landscape, as the benefits of dating someone and being intimate with them is having the validation that someone cares about you, right? Um, this current problem is obviously gonna it is obviously affecting the mental health of young people, more so, of course, young men because of the high sex drive. And even still, women are more social than men, but still not as social, as they don't have really as many friends, because both sexes are experiencing more loneliness, but also women in particular, they're experiencing less deep social connections, deep emotional connections, which they really care about. So yeah, that obviously is not going to be the case if they're not actually able to lock down someone long term. So yeah, yeah, even then, like the primary purpose of sex is to deepen the bond between two people. So yeah, for both men and women, it sucks. Um, and yeah, last thing about this subject is that knowing that someone cares about you to that extent of having a relationship with you, having sex with you, being intimate with you, is that they can motivate you and push you to become a better person. Because yeah, honestly, that's a great thing. That's a great motivating factor for a lot of people, and has been for, again, the vast majority of human history.
But that's, I think, a smaller part of the issue. I think the larger part of the issue, why are things start to skyrocket in 2014-ish area there in terms of less contact with one another? Because that the rise of social media begins.
It's interesting that social media is pinpointed as the main culprit behind this current epidemic. Um, as it does play somewhat of a role, and depending on what time period you're looking at. Where if we look at the graph in the video, and if we look at the period in which social media was being popularized, which was around 2010, 2014, there wasn't even this consistent upward trajectory across all six lines. Like even some of them go down. So, you know, is social media that much of a factor by itself? Um, I don't know about that. But yeah, if you look at the lines from 2018 to 2022, especially the yellow and gray ones, they skyrocketed. What happened then? Well, in 2020, the measures to mitigate COVID-19 were to make people essentially perform their activities at home. So whether it's working, they work from home, or whether it's studying at university, they did distance learning. And yeah, that meant that there was no reliable social ground of consistent low pressure social exposure, which these other avenues of that people like to point out, such as third spaces and hobbies, don't really provide effectively. And yeah, I'll be going over that in a bit in this video. Um, but yeah, essentially, and also in a video, in a more comprehensive way in its own video in the future. But yeah, essentially, um, it's just not contributing to a healthy dating landscape. So without these social settings, honestly, which have been in their original form for a good amount of time since the globalization or in and around the 1950s. Um, yeah, we're just seeing the negative downstream impacts from the lack of these social settings. And let's also remember that dating apps were tried initially during the early 2010s. So around 2012 and onwards, 2012 being the release of Tinder, the first major dating app. People were saying, to people who say that dating apps are really the ones causing all these issues, it's really not, because it's more so during these post-COVID years that they were the unfortunate substitute of the lack of more reliable social settings. So that being the workplace, meeting through friends, and yeah, also through university. Now, another claim that people like to make, or at least some people like to make when trying to explain this current situation, is, stuff such as the rising house costs, childcare costs, and rising cost of living. But that's kind of weird because that's only stuff that married people and long-term serious couples would actually care about, right? It's not something that people who are initially dating are so excited to talk about. It's not like, on a date, we're all happy and shit, and just discussing most trivial stuff, and then out of nowhere we just say, so, I was thinking about this mortgage option with this particular broker. What do you think? Like, no two people, yeah, no two young people actually talk about that when they're initially dating. So that's really a non-factor when it comes to explaining the current dating situation between young people. And yeah, of course, there are issues, there are actual issues, but again, it's more so for serious couples and married people, as they already gone through that initial phase of the pipeline, if you will. And that's when it actually matters. And yeah, another claim that people like to use is this supposed paranoia of like stuff like the Me Too movement, in which they would exaggerate how an initiation with a woman would have such a high likelihood of um, having your reputation or having your finances be significantly damaged, just for that particular decision by yourself. And yeah, I mean, if you do something extremely stupid, or something extremely unpopular within a social circle, then yeah, obviously you are going to get some significant ramifications for it. So obviously there are those cases, but most guys don't do that shit. Most guys are normal, and also most women are normal, right? There are these headline stories of weird shit happening, but you can think about that for any aspect of life, especially given that we have such a huge population across the world, and even so in like the Western world, so the US or the UK or whatnot. And also more of these, bad stories really just happen with guys who are celebrities, right? Guys who are rich, guys who have insane status. So That's not most guys. So I'm sorry to say this to you, but you're probably not that guy, buddy. Um, it's just one of those things, one of those excuses that is really just saying, I don't want to make a move on this woman that I fancy, so I'll just blame it on this movement that doesn't apply to my situation, so I can feel better about myself. So to conclude, there is more to the description of downstream impacts than just an aging population, right? So this current dating situation is causing negative mental health effects for young people. And by that extent, there will be a less productive and aspiring young generation in society across the world, which obviously is not a good thing. Um, Also, there are various factors that explain what contributed to the decades-long shift in sexual activity, or more so decline amongst young people, with some of them being like stress on a societal level, which it's kind of hard to address. So it's kind of fortunate in that sense. Maybe our economic situation could be better. But yeah, there's also the dating apps which fill up the social void, which is previously provided by more traditional and reliable social settings such as the workplace and university or college. Um, and yeah, there's also, of course, the increasing socioeconomic differences between men and women, which itself looks to have a difficult time to receive a proper systematic address. So, if anything, if anything promising, it shows up for that aspect, then yeah, I'm all up for it. But so far, it doesn't look like there is any meaningful progress from any government around the world on that aspect. And then there were some claims that I pushed back on, either lightly or completely. So one of them was social media, and of course, spending more time on your screen instead of going outside every now and then is going to contribute to a worse social landscape. But yeah, it's not something you can really action on. You can't really force people to get off their phones and go outside. And even then, it's a bit problematic because you know, as I mentioned before, with third spaces and hobbies, they're not really effective. I'll go more of this in detail in a future video, but essentially, one reason why they're not working is because most of these social activities, quote unquote social, aren't that effective for allowing people to um, develop social connection because there's kind of this pressure. I feel like people don't mention about this quite frequently enough when talking about third spaces and hobbies. But like one subtle thing is that the fact that you have to force yourself to go to a particular activity that is meant primarily for, let's just say, sports, when really you're just going there to socialize, kind of puts a bit of pressure onto that aspect of that activity, which kind of goes against the point of socialization, right? The point of socialization is that it's supposed to be easygoing, there's supposed to be no pressure. But inevitably, when most people go to these kinds of activities because they want to make more friends, it's actually harder because it's more forced in that sense. And it may be unpopular, but that is essentially one reason why these sorts of activities are not that effective on a societal level for people to meet friends and to also date. Of course, there are always exceptions. You always see these exceptions, these kind of back and forths of this kind of topic in online spaces such as Reddit. But yeah, in my opinion, from what I've seen, they're just the exceptions to the rules. Um, And yeah, another aspect of these, at least when it comes to hobbies, is that, for like physical activities such as a sports session or a gym class, is that nature of the class makes it so that it's hard to socialize because you're just focusing on the activity itself. Whereas in the workplace or university, there's just more downtime for people to just chit chat between each other, right? It's low pressure. There's just more space for people to just feel comfortable in engaging and initiating in social interactions with each other. Whereas in sports and physical activities, it's just more so focused on the activity itself. So there's little room to socialize with others. And even then, when the class is over, typically what happens is that people just like to rush, are just in a rush to go to the next thing. Like they want to go back home, get their groceries, and that's it. Like they barely stay even for like a few minutes to chit chat. So it's again just another reason why these hobbies and third spaces aren't so good. And lastly, for third spaces, because I didn't really address that in detail, and I will in a future video of mine, with third spaces, I don't think people realize it, but how you really arrive in third spaces is with friends. But the thing is, in this current social landscape, people have less friends, so it's less likely for them to go to these third spaces. And fourth, and another thing about that, I swear is the last thing, um, these third spaces are really more so in the city, and it's more so convenient when you're, let's just say, with your colleagues on a Friday or Thursday afternoon when you're finishing work, you want to grab a couple of pints, go to a bar or something. It's where young people of your own age can just chillax, just talk about work and just shit talk, I don't know, management or something. So yeah, that's really kind of what third spaces are about. They're ironically have a prerequisite of having friends, and more so it's after work because more of these, you know, um, uh, these so-called fuck, I forgot their name. These third spaces, they're more located towards the center of the city, as it makes economic sense that way. And yeah, it's just not a viable way to make friends in the beginning. So yeah, hopefully that sheds some light as to why these different types of outlets are not that actually effective um, for a healthy social landscape amongst young people. And honestly, people say that they are rising costs, which is bullshit. Like it doesn't cost really to get a pint at a pub. It's like £5. It doesn't cost to go to a cinema. Like you don't have to go every week, but at least every now and then you make an effort to reserve a bit of money to just spend some time with your peers, or maybe just go to a little um, not fast food restaurant, but I guess like kind of mid-scale, mid-class restaurant to just spend time with your colleagues or your friends. And yeah, that excuse of, oh, it costs too much is just bullshit. So yeah, you kind of maybe you're noticing this pattern of people just making up excuses, either like actually intentionally, or maybe they're just regurgitating what other people are saying on the topic without much thinking about it. So yeah, that's my thoughts about why those kinds of excuses are being made, or explanations are attempted to explain the current situation. But yeah, that was a bit of a long video. I hope you enjoyed it. Um, yeah, as you may have noticed, my insight, and I'm not saying this to be arrogant, but like honestly, objectively speaking, I do feel like my takes on the subject are a bit more unique than your typical YouTube channel who try to be unique, but they all end up saying like the same shit, like third spaces and so forth. So hopefully you like what I hear. You like the fact that hopefully I come off as trying to be critical in my reasoning, and therefore I can potentially provide a different voice and push towards a different direction, um, when it comes to improving our social health as a society. So, yeah, That's the end of this video. There's more that I want to talk on. There are other videos that I'll be doing reactions on. But I think for now that gives enough food for thought on this online discussion as to what are probable causes for this dating crisis. So yeah, as mentioned many times in the video, I'll be coming up with similar videos in the future, just focusing on stuff that I mentioned, such as meditation as a medication to stress, and also yeah, the social settings, what are the characteristics that make a social setting such as the workplace and university um, just conducive to allowing young people to form social connections. And I should have mentioned this earlier in the video, but when it comes to working at the office, I don't want it to be 5 days a week. 2 days a week is the better balance. Um, Obviously, there's like a disadvantage that everyone knows, like the kind of dread of having to prepare every day, wake up early, and commute into work to arrive at 9 a.m. So obviously, I'm also not a big fan of that. But yeah, some sort of balance has to be reached, some sort of return to what was previously working needs to be made. So yeah, that's essentially it. I'm kind of rambling here, but yeah, this is kind of my first kind of reactionary video, commentary video on the subject. So might not be perfectly organized or perfectly executed, but hopefully my main points were put across, and that kind of made you think that there's another way to address the current um, social epidemic that we're observing nowadays. But yeah, please if you have any comments, positive, or you have any disagreements, do let me know. Yeah, subscribe, like, and comment. Have a good day.